So basically the entire dynamic between these three is just the absence of this very abusive mother figure. Because when she's out of the picture, the ownership of the Honeysuckle becomes kind of a central point of conflict. This, just beat down corner store. These two are blood-related siblings. I think Leo is the youngest, and then Basil is kind of like, it's just like, she's a very stereotypical kind of like tomboy character. She's like super streetwise. But essentially, Solomon's not in the will because Sandy really hated him. So the restaurant or the corner store, it goes to these two to own. Because they're like good. And then I think part of the conflict of the first act is Solomon like kind of usurping the business because he's like a very smart businessman. He's super shrewd and he's like super and Solomon is basically the main villain of this entire thing. He's just a total asshole, but he's very manipulative of his younger brother. So basically, I think he either gets like Leo to like sell his share or something. Basically, he manipulates his younger brother into letting him into the business. He starts running it. And then they have a big fight with their sister and she leaves. So that's kind of the setup.
So we have characters.
Yeah.
And we have a situation, but we don't have desire on the part of any of the characters yet. We have Solomon wants in on the business. Do Leo and Basil want in on the business?
I think Basil had a good relationship with her mother, so I think when she sees very clearly what Solomon is doing this just to spite her because he had such a terrible relationship with his stepmom that like he's taking it over just like as he might not even know it, but he is just deeply vindictive and he's doing this as a means of kind of conquering his whatever. But all of this, essentially, I'm not even at like the inciting incident yet. I think the reason they have this fight is because the source shows up. There's two more important characters also. Basil has a girlfriend, and there's also a scientist who matters more towards the end. Basil's girlfriend is named Allie. Allie's very important to the plot. And then there's a scientist. I don't know, but that character is quite important as well. So there are 6 characters who matter to this. Basically, this inciting kind of conflict of this entire thing is one day an alien object, I think, and this is before Basil leaves actually. I think this is the reason Basil leaves, but, I shouldn't have done that. I should keep that up. Put that back. All this infighting and stuff is interrupted when she comes out after closing up the store one night, because the 3 of them like work there, and she sees like a meteor headed kind of like straight for her. And there are funny kind of moments in this too. But it's like, oh, it's getting brighter and brighter and closer and closer and closer. Oh shit, ducks. It goes straight through the front window of the store. She goes to inspect it, and it's basically this object. This weird fleshy object that fell from space, and it just looks like this, but like it has nipples. This is very important. It's like a weird fleshy pulsating, I think it's pink, or like it has to look a bit off. It can't look human, but basically it's a little bit bigger than a basketball, and it's just this disgusting object. And this is really the inciting incident of the plot, because we cut to the 3 of them standing around it, and now they have this random thing just fell into their struggling business. I think it has to be Solomon who does it, but he he grabs one of the the openings or the nipples or whatever, and he gets a little bit of like the juice, and it's like green. It's like a weird pale green, and he puts it in his mouth. and he realizes that this is like the greatest concoction ever. Basically, we're calling this stuff milk. Milk is like the limitless pill plus like, you know, actual happiness plus like, and there's no overdosing. It's a perfect drug. It is like literally going to change the trajectory of society forever. So Solomon, obviously, he starts selling this stuff out of the Honeysuckle. That's his game, because he's like, oh shit, I could sell this. Basically, the first act, use green for this. The first act is basically chronicling the rise of Solomon's empire growing out of this little convenience store. He starts selling this stuff to his cronies, and then it gets big, and the whole time the source is getting bigger. It grows biologically. So during this time, a few things have to happen. Basil gets ousted from the business, or I think, what did I say? Ooh, I had a good one. I think Solomon isn't like entirely evil, so I think she wants a buyout from him, and he knows that he's going to get very, very rich. So she takes a buyout, and she's gone. She goes back to her life. So then basically, after the first act is over, we cut to like 1 or 2 years down the line. So, oh yeah, Leo and Basil, that's important too, because Leo is like the little brother, and Solomon has such a toxic influence over him, but Basil is like, tries to get him to come back. Like, come on, are you really gonna go with this? And of course he gets manipulated into supporting his brother, so she always gets outvoted. That's kind of like their dynamic. So Leo becomes like Solomon's henchman, but of course he's in the position of the two, he's between the two major perspectives on this whole thing. Because he understands the kind of, like what they're doing is questionable, and he's got both of them kind of like the angel and devil on his shoulder. He's not really the protagonist, and you'll see why later. But yeah, the first act is the rise, and then there's a time jump. And after the time jump, Solomon is ruling from the top of a skyscraper. The source is like multiple stories tall, and it's attached to tubes. This is an industry, and so that's the first part of it. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. I think you're gonna run. I'm not entirely sure what the character's goals are.
Well,
Because, I mean, so Solomon is in this to make money. Well, they're all siblings, right?
yeah.
And they all have a different relationship to each other, which means they're. I'm framing up the shot.
This is not sponsored by Chipotle. Although, if you guys want to come do that, I'm always open. You were saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. You've got a family dynamic here that's interesting. They all have different feelings about their mother. They all have different feelings about the business. It all means different things to them.
Yeah.
Solomon, it clearly means money.
Yeah.
He wasn't raised by Sandy per se.
It's money and it's spite for her.
He wants to take. He wants to take. That seems to be his thing. But what do the other two want? The other two, are they givers, naturally? Are they sentimental? Does it mean something to them, familiar? That's going to inform how they feel about the suckle. And I think the time jump might be a mistake because he achieves, well, maybe not a mistake, but you're putting him in a position where he achieves that goal with no opposition from his siblings. But to me, the main engine of the conflict would be how all the siblings feel about this one thing. That's like the whole philosophy is like, how do all these characters make use of this one substance? Do they agree to share it? Do they fight over it? What does that fight look like? So to me, skipping to it's already an industry before at least the midpoint, right, robs you of a whole first chunk of the second act.
That makes sense. I'm of the thinking that I'm going to use my sticky notes here because I brought them. But these two, the schism between these three is kind of a point of question because at some point I want Basil to leave and I want her to get ousted because her getting ousted means that Leo has taken sides. Because Solomon sees her as a nuisance. I agree that she's not super well motivated at this point in the story, and I could use more of that. But at some point, I think by the end of the first act, she goes off on her own, or rather she's ousted from this company because of a conflict. And I think that conflict is, see, that's the thing, I don't know.
It's, okay, so to me it's actually crystal clear. You've got three characters, right? You've got one that you're gonna fuck over.
Yeah.
You've got one that's super malicious is going to do the fucking over. And then you have a sibling dynamic that somebody who's so exploitative would probably exploit. And I think maybe Basil is going to get ousted. Leo is her brother, younger brother, I assume.
Yeah,
and then
she's in the middle.
Yeah. He's impressionable. He's young. Maybe he's fresh out of college, no direction, easily exploitable. You get manipulative mastermind Solomon, who is looking to take advantage of him. He says, I will promise you some great reward. We will be business partners. Come do this with me. You're lost. You have no fucking money. What's she ever done for you? Come work for me. We're going to make the Honeysuckle business into a literal business empire. Yeah. We're going to turn it into something greater. This is why I'm kind of thinking that beef between Solomon and Sandy is a mistake. Because if he's on the outs of the business, he's got nothing to do, realistically. What's he gonna? He's gonna say, "Give me a share, give me a share, give me a share," and they can just say no, and then there's no movie. But if the other two characters, if Basil and Leo are stuck working with this third brother that they hate, then there's more tension. Then we're amping up the stakes and the conflict because now there's three people, right? And if two of them vote against the one, you can oust the other. So I'm thinking they all have an equal share. This thing lands. Solomon says to Leo, "Hey, Basil is just like Mom. She's shitty. She doesn't care about us. Let's take over this business from her." They do that. It goes well for the first chunk of the movie. And then Basil's lesson, and she's the protagonist in our eyes, then if the first chunk of the movie is about these guys making it an industry, the second chunk of the movie is where Basil realizes that she must take action. And the second part of the movie is like,
yes.
You know what I mean?
So let me get into that.
So at the midpoint, it kind of becomes a whole different ballgame.
So this is pretty insane. Basically, once Basil is ousted, she goes to live with Allie. And Allie is very important because I think Basil is, like, honestly against the drug very much. Like, Basil
she strikes me as a hippie.
Yeah, but she's also like, it's too good to be true. Basically, this drug makes your mind like just so much more powerful. When we pick up, after, I think maybe there's a time jump, maybe there's not. But once we reach the height of Solomon's empire, it's good. That's the thing. That's the weird thing. It's good. It's not a dystopia. Not yet. Because this drug is actually making everybody happier and more productive. And I think she's kind of looking for like a way to hate it.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Because I think there's a bitterness to her. Like, she's a little jaded. I don't want any of these characters to be saints. I think her hate for her brother for fucking her over, becomes a hate for his business. and then everybody's on this drug. Now, the only downside of this drug is that the withdrawal is excruciating. There's no other downside.
You can't go back.
You can't go back.
Or you will die.
It's like the spice from Doom.
Okay.
So, Basil hasn't taken it. But like everybody else is on it, and it's fine. Because it's here, the supply is good.
Idea. One faces you, one faces me.
Is that how it works?
Oh.
Oh.
You summit, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea. So then we create, Basil's plot involves her hate for this drug, making her more and more unhinged, basically. So she has this girlfriend. The girlfriend is obviously on it. I think part of their dynamic is she's pushing the girlfriend to quit. Maybe to the point of like insanity and delusion. Like Allie is like in a corner tied up screaming. This is a bit hyperbolic, but like she's so insistent that you can just quit, you can just say no. And Allie's like, no, I really need it, like you don't understand. And Basil is just becoming more and more fanatical as the second act goes on. And then maybe, once Allie's health genuinely starts to fail, she realizes that she has to go get more. Oh, I fucked up, this is bad. And then a major plot point happens that kind of gets explained later. I'm going to pretend this is kind of the midpoint. The midpoint is very important in this. So she realizes, oh, this is bad. Allie's going to die. She has to go get some, but they're out. For the first time ever, the supply is dry, or it's too expensive. One of those two. I think it's probably that it's suddenly the price just shot up. Nobody knows why. It's insane. And the world is panicking. Like this perfectly stable society, we see this from the street level perspective of Basil. It's like it's going to shit all of a sudden for no reason. Like you have this perfect society based on this drug, and now it's all just falling apart. Why? Nobody knows why. We don't learn yet. But anyway, she can't get the drug, and Allie dies.
That's midpoint.
Not quite. Because after Allie dies, Basil snaps, and she realizes that she has to go kill Solomon.
To stop the business?
To stop the business.
Suckle.
So she, in her head, this is like she's a hero. She is like about to go save the world, but she's so unhinged by this point because this person she loves that she kills Allie basically, like through forcing
she
her.
was doing a good
I know,
thing.
and it's just like imagine the weight of that. Like,
so you have
she already hates her brother. It's like she's got to get him. She's got to take him out.
You have a compelling thing here, which is a bad person who does a good thing for the world, and a good person who does a bad thing for themselves. Like people existing in that gray space, which I think will make an interesting plot dynamic. I think you have. Maybe she wants. I think revenge on her brother for what she deems to be responsibility for Allie's death.
Yeah.
Is a good starter. I think what she should eventually come to is that it's more. She should be saving. It's the Last Jedi thing. It's like the save what you love, not fight what you hate kind of thing. I mean,
we've both done a little bit of that in run writing. Okay.
What?
In 2080X and stuff, there's a bit of that energy.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like
it's the reason you do a thing.
Yeah, it's on. I think. I'm trying Leo in. Like Leo isn't just a plot device. I mean, she has. It's like who has the.
Okay.
It's really a
great
war
scene between
over.
them that I thought of for around this part.
Well, the story to me is like it's about the suckle, the source. I'm gonna keep calling it the suckle because that's the word. It's about the source, but it's really about the corruption of Leo in a who gets to handle the youngest brother.
Yeah. Okay, so these two, towards the end, once the carnage is started, right? Because apparently there's a shortage, nobody knows what's going on. Leo amidst this chaos, and we haven't seen him since the end of Act 1 because we've been following Basil for the first half of Act 1. So these two, they go to the ruins of the Honeysuckle, and these two get a very important scene where Leo, like, he kind of accepts, like, that he fucks up. We see where his head's at.
He regrets
He's
going
been a
into
henchman.
business.
He's been a henchman to a crime boss for the last long time. Now he sees, like, kind of what they've done, but he's still loyal to Solomon. But more importantly than that, Leo says, come back. Like, you know, there's a place for you. And that's very important. I think Leo, I don't know why he asks that, but somehow he wants her to come back into the business. It's like, we could use you. Like, there's always a place for you up here.
Okay, so if Solomon wants to exploit his family's business for money, and Basil wants... What does Basil want?
Well,
wants revenge about halfway through, and then but I think Leo just wants his family
just wants
to
his
be
family back
okay.
together.
Right. Okay. So now
he's
have
a pacifist. He is like he's trying to mediate. And it probably took a lot of convincing for him to convince, because he has no idea what Basil's been up to.
Well, I think part of it is probably guilt. Part of his motivation is guilt
Yeah.
about ousting Basil because he shouldn't have done that. He realizes that it came from a place of
And
desperation.
I don't think Solomon is all bad. Solomon is not Isaac. Solomon is like,
No,
I can
he's
see Solomon extending an olive branch. He's a deeply troubled person.
he
Yes.
values extremely different things from his sister, though. His sister,
Yeah.
Basil clearly values love because of the way she treats her girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Basil's a character who's not going to do things that she doesn't deem morally right, which is part of why she doesn't go into the business, right? That's what creates their juxtaposition. And
Yeah.
the only reason they're in conflict is because Solomon doesn't feel that way. And I think putting a character like Leo in the middle of those two is going to generate interesting stories.
So that's a very important scene between these two characters, because he says, come back, and she's like, I think she says no at first, out of spite, but then she realizes this could be my opportunity to take out Solomon.
Okay.
And at this point, she's been in Rocky training montage mode. She's been crazy, you know?
I think Leo offers her to come back out of desperation at the beginning of 3, if I were to structure this out, because you need an act of setup, right, of family dynamic faced with this problem. Here's what it's like. You need an act of everything's going right for the bad guy, essentially. The brothers are having success in this business. Then everything goes to shit with Allie and Basil's relationship. And now Act 2 is where she goes on a quest for revenge. The quest for revenge takes her right up to Leo, who says, come back to the business. And now she's got the door. That's finally
the door.
The reward at the end of the second part of Act 2 is Leo opening the door because he wants her to come back to the family. She's not even seeing family anymore. She's seeing, I gotta kill this motherfucker.
Yeah.
And so then Act 3 is about Basil versus Solomon and Leo.
It's a bit more complicated than that. See, that was a plan. But I think after Basil and Leo's meeting, there's this one scene I've had in my head for a very long time.
Question, where is that camera pointing? Is it at my camera?
Oh, I had it tight on you, and then I had it on, like, I've had it doing weird stuff, but I'll turn it back to you now.
You put it where you want it. It looked like it was pointing at my camera, and I didn't know if that was usable footage.
Like 27 minutes. So, essentially, there's the scene, because Solomon is in a skyscraper penthouse, right? And the Suckle is at the top. Like, this is a proper villain lair.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the top. It has tubes attached to it. We see it later.
It would be cool what if it grows into an organic mass that houses the entire company? Like it is the building.
Ooh, that could be cool.
A fleshy living building.
That's cool. Okay. There's an elevator down the middle of it.
Yeah.
And Basil somehow, there's this very specific song that plays, but she's at the bottom of the elevator. She gets into the elevator. There are a couple henchmen. Maybe she uses some kind of gas, like just to knock them out and get one of their guns. Like, I don't want it to be stupid. Like, I feel like Solomon would send guards, so she has to take out the guards somehow, and she has to do that intelligently. Like, she's smart. She's a bit crazy, but she's smart. So anyway, she's going up the elevator, gun in hand, ready to go. It's like, it's going down. It's going down. She gets to the top, and before the doors open, we cut away. So that is the midpoint. And then we trace it all the way back, and we do the whole thing from Leo's perspective. So we see the second act from Leo's perspective. So this was Act 2, basically, right? And then this was the first half of Act 2, and this is the second half of Act 2. And then we go back and we see how Leo got to this regrettable point.
So
And we get to see Solomon, and we get to see the Empire too, mob stuff, you know?
Act 1 is about all three of them.
Yes.
I'm going to say 4 acts for the sake
Yeah,
of
that's
simplicity.
good.
That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah.
Anyway. Act 2 is about who?
Act 2 is pretty much just Basil and her kind of descent into like realizing what she has to do.
Act 3 then would be about how Leo got to the point to invite her.
Yeah.
Where are we putting Solomon?
Well, we see Solomon through Leo's arc here. So Solomon does not show up in Act 2, but Act 3 is pretty much the dynamic between these two. At the beginning of Act 3, we need to see the Empire at its height. We need to see everything going great. This is the point where I want to introduce that scientist character.
You're going to introduce a character halfway through the movie?
Yeah, it's a side character though. But the scientist becomes relevant later. I think because they're government people. Because this drug is so ridiculous. There are a few things we have to establish about it. One, it only comes from the source. It cannot be artificially manufactured. And this is like a government scientist or something. It's like, can we just go in and like, you know, samples? Like, we don't understand it. This could be dangerous. Solomon's like, nah, fuck you. There's a science person around, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the bulk of this is about these two. We see kind of the operations of the mob. We learn a lot about Solomon. This is, I think, where we learn the most about Solomon. Like, maybe he and Leo have some scene where Solomon is drunk and kind of expressing his regrets or something. I don't know.
Okay, so it's an act about Leo, but it's really about Solomon.
It's about both of them.
They're together.
It's about both.
Yeah,
They're together
yeah,
the whole time. And then I think eventually... Oh, but then something important happens in Act 3 too, which is, for some reason, they don't know why, the source just stops producing milk.
Is that the break into 4?
Not quite. The source stops producing milk, and this is when the world goes crazy. So then, since there's no longer an abundance, obviously, like, you know, he has to start giving it to his cronies. It just becomes a pretty straightforward, like, resource shortage. It's extremely expensive, and I think this is why Solomon is getting more emotional and unstable, because his empire is, you know, it's a good time to wring some drama out of these two. Because it's like, why did it stop? And that's why the scientist is there. It's like, we don't fucking know. This is weird. This is really bad. We don't understand. But, yeah, the thing is dry. They don't know why. I think this is all still before the meeting between these two. So I think Leo can disclose this to her. He can say, look, we don't know why, but it's dead. And I think maybe Basil gets her foot in the door by saying, I can help somehow, or...
She could be a botanist or a scientist or a biologist.
Honestly, yeah. That'd be really cool. Her name is a plant.
Yeah, right. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think green is her color, plants are her thing,
Yeah.
hippy dippy, whatever.
I agree. She's kind of like a razor-edged kind of hippie character.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Like, I want characters with, like, strong personalities, 'cause I feel like I don't do a lot of that, but I really want, like, explosive, like, memorable personalities.
I like to attach actors who I would never get to them, for their types or whatever. Basil strikes me as like an older version of Zendaya. Like, imagine Zendaya.
No, I've been getting that too. Yeah,
Zendaya in like 15 years.
I never see Basil and Leo. I never really pictured in my head. Originally, they were going to be Italian, and I was like, are we really going to do that?
Leo is like...
Solomon I picture as like a very, very buff, like Afro-Latino dude for some reason. Just like, he's like super tall. Like he could be like a baseball player. Like, he just has that look to him. And he wears a crazy suit.
Like a John David Washington type? Like,
yeah, it could be. I don't know. He's like a kind of a Afro-Latino dude in my head.
All right, well, yeah, he's
But
not.
appearance-wise, you know, it doesn't really matter.
And then Leo is like a young actor working.
Yeah,
now
definitely Leo's like 23, you know.
In this,
Basil's like late 20s. Solomon is probably 34.
Is Evan Peters still old enough still young enough to play?
I don't know. He might have
No, he's way older.
sealed his fate as an older actor.
Yeah, I think after Donner. But anyway.
Yeah.
As far as types go, you've got the lovable, nice younger brother. You've got the strong-headed biologist hippie. Like, Basil's a really interesting character. I think she got a lot going for it. And then Solomon is like, he's got mommy issues.
Oh yes, big time.
I
want him to drink directly out of the thing, like the.
Oh, it's like
I think he does that shit. That's
like
that's
the
the
boys.
perfect weird little thing for him to do.
Yeah.
Especially as he's getting crazier.
He is like. He's got mommy. So he's Patrick Bateman, but instead of killing people, he manipulates.
I don't want to think he's like completely devoid of empathy.
No,
I think
right.
we have to see a little empathy out of him because I don't just want a character who's a monster.
He's just a businessman with mommy issues.
Yeah, and I think the fact that that right after his mom dies, he finds this weird thing with like breasts. It's the perfect bit of like morbid absurdity, and I want to lean into that sometimes.
Very excited.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
there's a bit of strange like mommy issues running through him.
So. The thing is, I feel like we have a lot of ideas. This is a very vast network. It's about funneling it in a forward momentum. Like, one thing leads to another. Like, who is doing the thing that makes the other things happen?
Yes.
This is actually why recently I started breaking things down backwards. Like, this is what my idea for the final scene is. Well, how did we get there? How did we get there? How did we get there?
Yeah.
I think I might try and do that again, but it's like I don't know. It's really who's driving the plot is Solomon mostly. He's the one making the decisions that impact.
Yeah, but just stop for some reason. Are you still rolling on that one?
I am, yeah.
Well, that was weird. Oh wait, that card's full. Start it again. I don't care.
Solomon's taking a lot of the action that makes the plot happen.
He's also ruling from his high seat. I mean, he was doing a lot in Act 1, and he was doing a lot that we don't see in Act 2, kind of, but he's at the height of his power right before that thing dries up. He's at the height of his power. And once it stops producing the drug, it's like, you know, they're running off surplus, he's getting more stressed, cracks are showing, and we see his human side. We see, these two, maybe Leo kind of comforts him, maybe their dynamic switches a little bit, Leo becomes more competent. Leo's like, no, we're going to turn this around, we're going to do it right. I want Leo to be very, 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 very prevalent in this, and I want us to feel that he is at like the height of his relevance to the story, because he's going to die. He's going to die in an insane way. Okay. So, basically, we now have reached the point where, like, we know Basil's coming up the elevator, right?
Yeah.
We know this is happening. There's a storm gathering outside. It's odd. It's very strange. A strange smell in the air. Like, there's something weird is going on right now. The thing has been dried up for a while. Everybody's on their last leg. The city has gone to shit. And as Solomon and Leo are in there waiting for Basil to come up, the aliens appear.